driving to school. Hopefully you can hear me well. The last time I recorded while I was driving to school, I noticed that the phone was picking up the audio from my car because I have a little bit of an old car, so the sound is not blocked out perfectly. But my voice was still able to be heard. But I'm going to try and talk a little bit louder than I did the last time, so you could probably hear me a little bit better. But hello. Today I'm feeling sad. I journaled about it twice yesterday actually, but I'm just feeling a little bit alone. I've been feeling this way for a while, but I think just coming more to the reality of the aloneness that I feel, and just like my brain kind of calming down a little bit, things clearing out a little bit more, is kind of coming up to the forefront. Yeah, just in terms of like, there's a certain type of person that I want to be, a certain type of life I want to live, certain habits that I want to cultivate, a vision that I have of reality, not just my life, but reality itself. And I can feel very alone in that vision and pursuing it with the people that I currently have around me. I think I've felt like that since high school, honestly. To different degrees, I have felt it. But I think where I'm at right now is just like, I don't know, it just feels a lot more prominent, especially because of the downward spiral that I was experiencing last year, and not really feeling like the people around me were noticing it, or like they didn't have a vision of reality, right? They didn't have a vision of reality that could notice that I was spiraling and that something was wrong and that things could be better. So yeah, it just left me feeling very like neglected and lonely internally. Anyways, that's not the point of this recording, but I just want to say that because it's on my mind. Oh, the reason why I want to say that is because at the beginning of this, I was singing a song. I'm listening to a worship track that I like. I like it. And I was listening to it because I'm feeling really sad. Normally on my drives to school, I'll listen to like a podcast or an audiobook, but I was like, I need emotional support. So I was like, let me listen to this worship track. I'm hungry. Ooh, my stomach. And I'm not eating for another 2 hours, but it's okay. I know how to fast. Yeah, so I was like, that part of the song just came up like right before I pressed like record, so I was just like singing it. But anyways, what I wanted to talk about was the economics of worldview. Such an academic. So I really do view most things in life from an economic perspective, and I think it's a good way to view life if you have a correct understanding of what economics actually is. So economics is not just like money and like trying to extract value out of things, which a lot of people think it is. And it's just, they don't have a lot of like education on economics. A lot of economists don't even have education on like fundamental economic theory. They're just given, this kind of ties into it, but they're just given, or they just take what they're given in like school and maybe don't necessarily explore like certain questions or certain presuppositions, assumptions that we have when we're talking about economics, when we're talking about specific things. So simply put, economics is I would say there's a perspective of economics and then there's a practice of economics. So I'm specifically talking about the perspective of economics. The perspective of economics is understanding that there are certain goals that we try and attain, and there are limitations on how we can attain those goals. And economics explains how someone reaches a certain goal within the confines of those limitations. Plain and simple, that is exactly what economics is. Typically in the practice, that's applied to like meeting material needs. Typically, yeah, meeting material needs, and that's how we get things like money and like businesses and the economy and trade. That's how those things come about in the practice of economics. But the perspective is more so, how do we reach the goals? How do people go about reaching the goals that they have with the limitations that they face? And that can literally be applied to anything. One thing that I've wanted to research is like the economics of evolution, because I think that would be really interesting to show like economics economic perspective is not just limited to meeting material needs. It can literally be applied to anything and everything, and I think it should be applied to anything and everything because it allows us to evaluate like how we make the decisions that we make, why we make the decisions that we make, what factors we're considering, what things we may be missing, or what we're aware of, what we're not aware of, what is influencing us. Even asking the question like why we want certain things, because a core concept of the economic perspective is opportunity costs. An opportunity cost meaning you're using resources to achieve a certain goal, but there might be another goal that is more worthwhile that you should actually put those resources towards, because certain resources, actually all resources, once you apply them towards a certain goal, they are then like, there's a word I'm looking for, precluded from being applied to another goal, and that other goal might actually be a bit more worthwhile than the one you're using it for, but you have to be aware of that. And you have to even be aware that the goal that you're pursuing is one of many that you can choose from, and not just like the only one. Yeah. So I love economics because of that. Because I took my first economics class my freshman year of college, and I absolutely fell in love with it. And I think subconsciously, it really has informed the way that I live my life. I think it's a fantastic way to approach life. I think especially with emotions. Emotions and relationships, although like, because emotions are a factor in economic decision making when it comes to like relationships, because they are either part of the goal we're pursuing or they're a part of the like constraints that we face in pursuing that goal, our emotions and the emotions of other people, and factoring that in can actually make you make way better decisions when it comes to that. So yeah, economic perspective for everyone. I think everyone should learn. But what I specifically wanted to talk about was the economics of worldviews. And the reason why I wanted to talk about that is because I've been thinking about it within the past couple of months. Because I went through a re-evaluation phase of my faith last year. And I'm in a place right now where I'm trying to like stabilize it a little bit. So I'm not asking as many questions for mental health reasons. I just want to practice certain things and just have that be a part of my life and not constantly questioning and upending. That phase will come back again. It's just a part of how my brain works. But for now, I just need to stabilize like a little bit. So not as many questions being asked, but along that journey of reevaluation, I started like, this question started coming into my head in terms of like, why do you believe that, or why does your mind default to that thing? And that's because last year I realized like the of perspectives that there are to have, the range of actions that there are for any given situation that we are presented with. Like it's enormous. Like it's infinite, honestly. And realizing that really started making me like, I always wondered, why do people do the things that they do? And I think I kind of came to like but I think my perspective before was like, some people, like, why are people the way that they are? In terms of like, it's kind of like fixed. And this is just like who that person is, and I just have to understand that. But now I'm coming to realize, I'm like, no, like, for one, you actually don't have to stay the way that you are. And there is a reason that causes your mind to go a certain way versus another, and that reason is not fixed. Like, it can actually be changed. Like, it can be changed. And so I'm curious about like, what makes someone's mind default to something, or look at something a certain way, or react a certain way versus another. Because if we can get to the why of what that happens, we can actually address like the core thing that it is you're feeling, the core value it is that you have that causes you to do something, and probably find a better solution. And the reason why I want to work on worldview is, I think specifically because I was reevaluating my faith. Like belief systems, and whether it's religious or like political or social belief systems, they are a stronghold on our mind. And I just think like, because I'm constantly evaluating things, this is one way to evaluate like our worldviews, because we receive worldviews and belief systems as like kind of objective reality, or the way that we should view life. And obviously, if you've been on the internet for any amount of time, you see that there are countless worldviews out there and belief systems to be had. So then the question stops becoming which one of these is right, and it starts becoming what function does this worldview serve. Worldviews stop becoming like an ends unto themselves and a goal, and they start becoming a means, the constraints, remember, like I said earlier, by which we achieve certain goals that we may not even be aware of that we're trying to achieve. And somehow in that process, the worldview stops being a goal. The worldview stops being a means or a constraint and starts being a goal. And it's like, why does that happen? Why? Because we take worldviews because they serve a certain function. That you can't argue with that. We don't take worldviews because we think it's true. We take worldviews because they serve a certain function. In them serving that function, they transform from being like a utility thing into being an ends unto themselves. Like, it's, let me think of a specific perspective. This is a trite example, and I'm probably not going to represent it well, but let's say like something within a feminist perspective, like women are equal to men. Okay, women are equal to men is a function. Originally, it was a function. Women weren't allowed to have certain social rights, whether that was voting. Women in America, let me say that specifically, and other countries around the world, but I'm in America. Women weren't allowed to vote. Women weren't allowed to work or outside the home, or they couldn't have certain jobs as men. Women didn't have as much freedom in like their relationships or as much control. And women felt confined, constrained as a result of that. And because of that, first of all, having to think of these things on the spot while I'm driving is like, wow, I'm developing a skill. But yeah, so then, okay, wait, let me get my brain back. So then the function of women are equal to men was to allow women, the function, it served a goal. The goal was for women to have a little bit more freedom in their lives to be able to do the things that they. So the goal was female autonomy, and to not be constrained by these, what were perceived as arbitrary social rules about women's status or place in relation to men. So women are equal to men was a function in the pursuit of female autonomy. Somewhere along the way, women are equal to men became a goal in and of itself. And it was no longer about women achieving the same autonomy as men. And it was about, again, I may not actually be representing this well, so this is just like an example that I'm creating in my mind. But it was no longer a way to achieve a goal. Remember, constraint and end. It was no longer one of the constraints that we use to, I need to change lanes, that we use to achieve female autonomy. It became a goal in and of itself, that women are equal to men, and whatever we need to do to achieve that needs to happen. Okay, so that's an example. I could probably think of others like later. But okay, so where was I going? Belief systems, worldviews, like they serve a function versus like they're a means versus they're a goal in and of themselves. Yeah, so my question is like, why do people hold to, or I said this before, but I'm just going to repeat it, why people hold to or default to certain worldviews? Like, what function is this serving in your life? And I don't think we're often aware of that when it comes to worldviews, because we treat worldviews as goals in and of themselves and don't realize that they are actually a means towards an end. And I would say even in like, I don't know why this came to my mind, but even in like collectivist cultures, because that statement sounds more like individualistic, like, people choose worldviews to serve certain individual ends within themselves. Whereas somebody may say, like, in a collectivist culture, like, people don't just serve, like, their own ends, like, they hold worldviews because that's the worldview of the group that they're in. And growing up in an individualist culture, I would push back, because people do in fact have people as individuals in fact do have the decision to leave the group that they are a part of. The reason that they stay serves a certain individual end for themselves, whether or not they realize it. The choice to be a part of a group and to stay in it no matter what you experience is serving a certain end for you. And the reason to adopt the worldviews of that group at the expense or at the cost of maybe individual worldviews that may feel more beneficial to you as an individual but not necessarily to the group as a whole serves a specific end. What is that end? That's the question. The economics, in this whole conversation about the economics of worldviews, my question is, what is the end for different worldviews or different defaults or different heuristics that we have? Because we talk about things as if they are objective, and they're not. They're always subjective. Human beings are subjective. Everything that we do is subjective. But what is the end we are trying to achieve? Why do you keep reacting this way? Why do you keep defaulting to this thought pattern? Why do you keep making these decisions? Why do you keep thinking like this? What is causing you to think like this? Not just because you think this thing is true. You're holding this as a constraint in your mind about achieving a certain goal. My question is why? And is it a good constraint? Because constraints can be changed. Constraints can be changed. When it comes to things like perspectives, they can in fact be changed. Now obviously I know there's neurobiology and our brains are made up in a certain way and things like that. So sometimes certain constraints cannot be changed. But from my research, I have seen that people can do work let's say people that are neurodivergent, because neurodivergencies are typically just brain structure, the chemical makeup of your brain. I have seen that from the little bit that I have researched, I have seen that those things can actually, because the brain is also plastic, let's remember that. If you train certain parts of it, it grows stronger. If you neglect certain parts of it, it gets weaker. So you can go to therapy and you can do certain practices that strengthen your brain and change it in a certain way, not just the structure of it, but also the chemical makeup of it. Also, we have things like drugs that literally change your chemical makeup and the way that you perceive the world. So yeah. So while there are physiological constraints to our mindsets and stuff, that stuff can in fact be changed with modern knowledge and modern science and all that stuff. So then the question becomes why do you default to this? And I don't think that's a question most people have, because they genuinely just see the constraints as the world as it is, and they don't see it as something that can be changed and something that can be adapted to fit the true goal that they're trying to meet. Because they're not aware of the true goal that they are trying to meet, and they're not aware that this is a constraint that their brain has picked up on that seems like it is viable towards achieving that goal. So I hope that makes sense. It was a lot of theoretical jargon and talk, but this would be a cool paper to write. So I wanted to write it. I wanted to vocalize it while it's still in my mind, and then maybe I'll come back and actually write it down later in a more cohesive manner so that it makes sense and I'm not just word vomiting. But I hope it made sense. I felt like my thought process was sequential and logical. But yeah, this is something I've been thinking about a lot. I think specifically as I'm trying to find a spiritual home within Christianity that feels right. It's because it's serving a certain goal for me. Even before I went through this whole reevaluation, there were certain parts about the Christianity that I was presented that I took, and certain parts that I didn't take, and certain parts that I came up with on my own, because it serves a certain function, it serves a certain goal. We rely on certain things for a reason. We may hold on to something as a truth, even though it may feel emotionally and existentially threatening to us, because it serves a function of us wanting to be aligned with what we believe is true. But then even us understanding what is true is it's confined, it's constrained, it's informed by certain things. I think a good example is, I think about this a lot. So people that become Christian, let's say later on in their lives, so let's say their 20s, right? 20s and 30s. people that become Christian or start taking like Christianity more seriously if they grew up with it or like not too serious about it. Something happened for them to do that. Okay, something happened for them to be like, oh, I'm going to take this thing seriously. First question is, why is it that you went to Christianity versus like anything else, right? Or there are people who have gone to other things and then landed on Christianity. Why is it that Christianity was more convincing for you than the thing that you were doing before? What purpose did it serve? What did it reveal to you about reaching the goal that you have in your mind that you may not be aware of? Then they become Christian, right? And the resources that they have available to them, the constraints around being a Christian, are the Christian cultures that they are around. So they may be around people that are more, or people in environments or churches or even social medias that are more charismatic in nature. Or they may be around ones that are more reformed in nature. Or they may be around ones that are Catholic or Methodist. And because they want to take this worldview seriously that they have, they default, if you have like a few options, you tend to default to the one that's around you because that's all you know about what it means to be a Christian, right? And because having this worldview serves the function of whatever goal brought you here in the first place, and you want to take it seriously, you then take almost part and parcel what is given to you as serving the function that you initially had that brought you to Christianity in the first place. Or something different. If you're exposed to multiple worldviews, which is what I have been in the past like year as I was doing this reevaluation and researching, you then pick one of them because it serves a certain function. You're a little bit more aware of why you choose or why you default to a certain like culture or worldview. You're a little bit more aware of it, and my brain. I don't know why I'm trying to do calculations in my brain right now, but when I turned this on, it was about like 16 minutes into the recording that I was listening to. Right now, it's saying that it's 22 minutes long, and I'm doing the calculation in my head like that's 38 minutes, but that doesn't make sense because the GPS told me it would take 47 minutes to get here, and I started the music when I was at home, so I don't know. I don't know. Or maybe I calculated the time wrong. I don't know. It's not making sense. Let me just check actually. How many minutes was I? Oh, it's not even showing. Okay. Well, I'm at school now. That's why I'm like, did I speed? What was going on? Okay. Christianity, choosing worldview. Yeah, you're a little bit more aware of why you chose a certain worldview in terms of like it serves. You're aware of the function that it serves in your life and achieving this goal that brought you to Christianity in the first place. But another thing about the economic perspective is we're constantly balancing multiple goals at the same time. So it's not only serving this goal that brought you to Christianity in the first place, it's also serving a whole bunch of other goals that make up who you are, like maybe how you process things, how you like to interact with other people, maybe the culture that you live in, things like it's serving multiple goals. Nothing ever just serves a singular goal. That is never true. It serves multiple goals at the same time, whether or not we're aware of it, and we're constantly balancing, like constantly. That is called the utility function in economic theory. Is we're trying to maximize. Basically, what it is you're trying to maximize the utility, the different goals that you have. Each of them having different weightings on like your happiness. That's the common word. Happiness. Utility is the technical word. Happiness is the common word. And so you have this utility function, and ideally you want to get as high on the utility function as you possibly can, with these different things having different like weighted effects on your experience of happiness. But you're constrained, and the thing you are constrained by is the resources available to you, or what is typically presented to us as the budget constraint. And so in this example, the utility function might include whatever thing brought you to Christianity in the first place. Let's say like you wanted to I'm trying to think of some examples that bring people to Christianity, but you were in a really bad situation. It's still general. My mind doesn't work in specifics. what is a good example? Let's say you wanted to become a kinder person, okay? So that's one goal. Another goal is you're kind of an introvert. Okay, that's two. That's another goal. Another goal is you like to read and learn. So 3. Let's just say those 3 goals when it comes to picking a way that you be a Christian. Then the constraint for that would be, what do you have available to you to reach those goals? So one of the things you have available to you is Christianity, but then within Christianity, what Christian expressions or Christian cultures do you have available to you? How easily accessible are they to you? Other constraints in reaching those goals are the culture that you live in, right? The people that are around you, some of the influences, whether that's like music or TV shows, books that you read. Those things are your constraints. And I think another constraint that's important, which you learn about this in game theory, which is just a way in like of evaluating how people make decisions with constraints, but the constraints are then the goals of other people. Other people's goals are also other people's goals and other people's constraints factor into the constraints that you have. And managing those well towards reaching your goal also becomes part of the goal that you're trying to achieve. I know this is very like theoretical in general. I'm sorry, I'm not good at like giving specifics, but I'm trying to work on that. So yes, I hope I've tried to close multiple times and I keep talking because there's a lot in my brain. But I hope that makes sense. I hope. Maybe I'll come back and do a part 2. But anyways, the economics of worldviews. What is it we're trying to achieve? Let's ask that question. One of my favorite questions since I was in high school has always been why. Constantly asking why. It is, you find truth, or you get to the bottom of things when you continuously like ask why. It annoys certain people. And also, I have gotten that it makes people think. And I want people to think. I want us to evaluate what it is that we're doing and why. So that we can do it effectively. And so that maybe we can find that, because I think generally, there are things within every single one of us that are general across like the human species about what it is that we are pursuing. However, because of like our brain physiology and our chemical makeup and the people we've been exposed to, the cultures we've been in, social like conditioning and things like that, that core thing across humanity has been buried under other goals that are more explicit to us. So we may say one thing like, I want to be rich. And you think being rich is the goal, when actually the goal is either to be like, you want stability in your life, you want notability, you want power, those things. And even like something like wanting power, is it that you want power, or you just want to have a sense of like, you want a sense of control over your environment? And if you do want a sense of control, why? You keep asking why do you want a sense of control? Why do you feel like, what do you feel like a sense of control is giving you? Because a sense of control is not actually an end. It is a means by which you are achieving another end. What is that other end? So just continuously like asking yourself why, and shifting things from like being ends in themselves to being means. Because when you shift them to being means, and you're like, oh, what is it that I'm actually like trying to achieve by doing this, Okay. I hope that makes sense. I think this might be the first live that I make publicly accessible. I normally keep them private because I don't know when I'm going to make them public, but I feel like this is a perspective that can be really helpful for people. So, yeah, okay, bye, I'm at school.